startup. A lot of you have asked for this topic, and so we're happy to give it to you. We have a good little group with us today, so thanks for tuning in. I know it's finals and holidays and everything, but we wanted to kind of get this done before the end of the year, and I thought maybe with the winter break, it might give you some inspiration to get going with some brainstorming over the break. So what we're going to do is, in a minute, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Kristen Shipley, who is a Ron Brown captain. She's going to ask Peter our first set of questions. We have 5 very, very, very basic questions that we're going to let Kristen get out of the way first so that Peter can give us like a really good foundation of information. And then I'm going to open it up to all of you to ask your own questions at the end. So when you are ready to ask questions, there's 2 ways to do it. If you look at your control panel or you look at your screen, you can either hit the little icon to raise your hand, and I'll call on you, I'll take you off mute, and you can ask your question, we can all hear it. Or you can type the question into the question box, and I'll read it out loud. Sometimes people prefer to do that if they're in the library or somewhere where they can't ask questions. When you ask your questions, please try to aim for questions that are kind of broad or could be helpful to multiple people, sort of in the interest of time. But if you have like a very nitty-gritty question that's really personal that relates just to you or to your project, you can get in touch with me offline and we'll try to get an answer for you later. So, so with that, first I'm going to introduce Kristen, who's hanging out on the line, and I want to preface this by saying I'm really bad at introducing people, so Kristen and Peter, if I miss something, just let me know. But Kristen Shipley is a Ron Brown captain. She's a junior, journalism and mass communications major at North Carolina Agriculture and Technical State University. Kristen is just like all over the place. She writes content for LinkedIn. She's super active on campus with the campus news and various communication programs, plus student government. Last summer, I believe Kristen interned at both Facebook and Google, plus participated in the White House initiative for HBCUs. I think Kristen is returning to Google for another internship in 2017. Kristen, you can correct me if that's wrong. But she also volunteers for Ron Brown with our GPS program for high schoolers. So she is an all-around hustler, and I thought she would be great for kicking things off today. So Kristen, hi Kristen, did I forget anything?
No, you're good. I didn't have 2 internships last summer. I interned for Facebook, and then I did the Google Bold Immersion program. But I'm going to Google next summer. So that's
Okay,
all.
awesome.
But thank you. That was awesome.
Oh yeah, sure. And then uh, Peter Boyce is a Ron Brown scholar who graduated from Harvard around, I'm thinking like 2012. Is that right, Peter?
2013.
13 with AB in applied mathematics and secondary in computer science. And while he was on campus, he co-founded Harvard Ventures and Hack Harvard, which were some student-led organizations that kind of built community around engineers and entrepreneurs. And now Peter is a principal at General Catalyst, which is a venture capital firm. That backs exceptional entrepreneurs. And he oversees Rough Draft Ventures, which where General Catalyst invests in promising university entrepreneurs. He's very passionate about student entrepreneurs. He was in your shoes at one time. Before joining General Catalyst, Peter worked with startups across many areas: education, media, personal finance, and I think you also worked at a hedge fund. Is that correct, Peter?
Long time ago.
Yeah.
Long
Yeah.
time ago.
Oh my gosh. And I think I saw on a YouTube video that you were supposed to be a physics major, but
Definitely. Yeah,
that was
I
another.
totally had an about face. Yeah.
Right, right. You found, yeah. So you found your true calling. What did I leave anything out on that?
That sounds about right.
All right. Well, we're glad you didn't major in physics.
Trust me. The world definitely did not need me as a physicist.
So the world needs you right where you are. So thanks, guys, so much for being here. And what I'm going to do, Kristen, I'm going to let you go ahead and get started. I'm going to launch this little PowerPoint here so we can see the question that's being asked while Peter's talking. So go ahead, Miss Kristen.
Okay, thanks so much, Peter, for joining us. I'm excited for this conversation as well. So the first question that we have for you is how did you get started in this business? What kind of sparked your interest and how'd you get started?
Yeah, totally. So for me, when I kind of look back, I definitely wasn't super familiar with the notion of, being an entrepreneur when I was in high school. But one of the things I was super excited about was I was always, really into computers, and I started like a little computer kind of consulting business with a group of friends from high school. And turns out it was basically kind of like the Geek Squad, with a bunch of my kind of best friends from school, kind of fixing computers and setting up computers for folks. I think that was kind of one of my first kind of early experiences, building a company and building something, and creating the website, coming up with like a little bit of a business plan, and kind of rallying people around a vision. So it was a really important kind of first experience for me. But as Holly was mentioning, I definitely, went into college thinking that I was going to study physics and, eventually one day, potentially be a physics professor. But when I was in school, I kind of had the opportunity to, number one, study a lot more computer science and get exposed to that world, because it wasn't something that, I wasn't thinking about computer science and technology and startups as a career. And I think college kind of illuminated that for me. The second piece is I had the opportunity to work at a startup while I was in school, and I think this is something that is increasingly accessible for students today. If you look 10 or 15 years back, it was not easy to get a job at a startup or any software company. They typically weren't recruiting on campuses and looking for young people, but that's changed a lot now. And that experience for me was hugely valuable because I was super passionate about education and trying to think about companies that were going to redefine education. Two, I know I wanted to work at a small company where I could learn a ton and work really closely alongside a CEO, a founder of a company. And number three, I wasn't going to go through like a formal kind of recruiting process because I didn't want to, submit my application and all that stuff. I just didn't think that that was the right way for me to find something really interesting. So I was super lucky to land a gig at a startup for a summer. And I think that's what kind of opened me up to the world of startups and venture capital and a lot of the technology community that was growing in New York. And then from there, I was just totally, totally, totally set on building a future that involved startups. And eventually I came to find that kind of venture capital was the right format for me. In that with venture capital, I learned that you basically can interface with a number of different startups all at the same time and finding ways to be helpful to CEOs and founders. And it was really similar and analogous to a lot of what I was doing at Harvard. So Holly mentioned, I started 2 student groups to help students learn more about venture capital, learn more about startups, connect with each other, and ultimately, I think accomplish more than any one of us would be able to do individually. It just so turns out that that's pretty analogous to what VCs do. You look for amazing people, find ways to be helpful to them, invest in their companies, and help them kind of build the future of technology, which is what I'm excited to do today.
Wow, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing. So our next question is, what is your advice for coming up with ideas for startups? Where did yours come from, and what's
Totally.
yours?
Yeah, it's a good question. So for everyone, it's often a different flavor. I'll tell you, I think many of the best companies are born from personal pain points. I think the authenticity you can have around things that you want to see differently in your own life or in your community or on your campus or in your world, I think is a really great place to get things started. And so one of the things I really like is, and I recommend folks do, is basically keep a bug list, like a computer bug, like is kind of like a mistake or an error that keeps coming up, and you want to think of a solution for in computer science. I think about like life bugs. And so as you kind of go out through your day and your week, just kind of write down the 1 or 2 things where you're like, man, wouldn't it be awesome if X, Y, or Z, or like, I wonder why this is so hard, or I wonder why this doesn't exist, or I really wish I had that. And keeping a list of those things, if you start to find recurring patterns, or if you keep coming back to the same idea over and over again, And if you don't discover a company doing that, that's like a pretty good area to start exploring, potentially launching a company. There are a number of examples, I think, of great software companies being built from personal pain points. And I think if you can get into the routine and develop a little bit of a habit of kind of identifying them and writing them down for yourself so you can keep track of them over time, I think this is a great first place to come up with ideas. I think the second is, another popular one, but, I think is potentially a little bit, it's a little bit more hit or miss, but it's basically, coming up with a business model innovation. So, to the extent that you want to think about a business plan or a business idea, and can come up with basically kind of a new way to generate revenue, those can often be the foundations of ideas. So I'll give you an example. Birchbox was a business model innovation in that it was, take what is typically given away for free, basically, beauty samples, package it up in a box, send it out, as a monthly subscription, charge people for the monthly subscription, and then sell them the full-size items. And that's kind of helped lead to a whole kind of explosion of new companies that are doing these subscription box as a service kind of companies. So men's clothes, women's clothes, movies, games, snacks, candies. Now everyone's kind of putting things in boxes for monthly subscriptions. But that really started as a business model innovation. And I think that's something that for students that are interested in entrepreneurship and business and are either getting their MBA or thinking about companies, that's another good way to come up with the business. And then I think the third really good category and way to come up with ideas is, and it kind of feeds into the second question, is just where are the trends of areas of growth. Look for kind of shifts in technology and or consumer behaviors. Because oftentimes, if you can catch these shifts, I think of it as almost like tectonic plates. If you can identify them, even if it's not clear how fast they're moving and how fast progress is going to take place, if you can spot them early on and build conviction that something is going on that's going to basically open up a whole new world of opportunity for either consumer behaviors or within technology, the early movers and the folks that think deeply on those kind of opportunities, I think can also really, really, really reap reward. One of my colleagues spends a lot of time especially thinking about this. He's an investor in a company called HubSpot, and the opportunity he saw was around companies needing more ways to create marketing material. So kind of, the way companies, identify customers through marketing. He identified that there's this kind of trend emerging around inbound, what's now called inbound marketing. So basically, creating content about your company and about your space that then leads customers to reach out to you as opposed to you reaching out directly out to customers. And this is a company that was very, very, very early on in the space. He was an early investor. It turns out many, many, many companies in the world want to understand how to market to their customers that way, and they use this software to do that. It's now like a $2 billion company. So Anyway, those are a few quick thoughts. And to touch a little bit of just kind of interesting areas right now, we call a whole kind of section of these kind of new, interesting, emerging areas kind of frontier tech. So you can think of this as drones, Bitcoin, agriculture tech, Internet of Things. These are kind of like the vanguard or the frontier in a lot of ways. And so, those are areas that are undergoing transition that can kind of create really big opportunities for entrepreneurs to start companies. So I would definitely encourage folks to, to the extent that they're interested in those areas, spend some time because it's very early days for all of those categories. So they haven't really, they haven't borne out a bunch of companies yet. So that's huge potential. And then honestly, one of the areas that I get super excited about and would encourage people to think about is just the notion of existing kind of legacy industries being reinvented. And so think about all the businesses and companies that use pen and paper for document management or don't use software or use software that was designed and built in 1999. I think all of those companies are ripe for reinvention. And so to the extent that you are familiar with or really passionate about trying to, reinvent an industry, I think that is, oh my gosh, I think there are going to be lots and lots of really amazing companies built off of that thesis.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Our next question is around first steps. So, who should we talk to first, and how do you approach people about getting involved with one of your ideas?
Yeah, totally. So this is great. I mean, I think, especially when I think about, Rough Draft Ventures, I think about this question specifically around students. And I think for folks that are out of school, the set of resources and people are different. I think the first and foremost, I think it's great to talk about your ideas. I think a lot of people think it's good to be stealth and kind of keep ideas close to their chest. But unless you're developing something that's super proprietary, I don't think that's usually a very valuable strategy. I think the more people that are walking around thinking about you and your company, the better, because it'll come up with interesting people to connect you with, and you can find collaborators that way. You might find a potential client or an investor or advisor that way. So I think talk to lots of people. And I also think to the extent that you can either, leverage Twitter or your own blog to share your ideas, the better, because you can get even more feedback that way, and you can help, people find their way to you that could be excited to help you or work together with you. I think the second piece is finding one or two co-founders or like chief collaborators early on. I think is hyper essential. I think it's very stressful and challenging to start a business by yourself. And so the faster you can go from one person to two or three people, number one will make it so you don't kind of end up with like founder cabin fever is the way I think about it, where it's like if you're kind of in your own head just working on things by yourself, I think it's really easy to get stressed out and hitting roadblocks. So really, really, encouraging folks to think about building that early team. And for that, I think people that are friends, people that are your coworkers, people that you went to school with are all really good kind of early prospects for conversations. And then I think one or two advisors. Once you feel like you've got enough conviction that you're really going to kind of do this, I think bringing on one or two advisors can be like a great force multiplier too. Um, but you can do that once you've got a little bit of the team. And then when I think about how you kind of approach people, I think to the extent that number one, you can research people before you spend time with them, I think is helpful. So, if you're interested in creating a company that, sells, it's like a food delivery company or a fashion company or a medical device company or, enterprise software, what's so nice about starting a company today is there's so much online information available about who are the CEOs and VCs and people that are interested in that as well. So you can find them on Quora and on blogs and a number of websites. And so I think that's a powerful place to start for identifying people and researching people. I think if you have, whether it's a website or a blog where you have a little bit of a digital footprint about what you're excited about, what you're interested in, this is like a great aid in approaching people because it shows that you're serious about something and that you've got enough conviction that you've got some resources kind of online that are proof of that. So I think that's important. And I think the third is, and folks talk a lot about this a lot in venture, which is, you should try to think through, who you can leverage in your network to be your early champions and can kind of connect you with other people. And so, I think even, looking to the Ron Brown community, there are so many CEOs and folks in the business world that are in our network that can be, help make a connection to a person that can be valuable. So, the extent you can get warm introductions to people is really good. And then I think lastly, I think you have to be super present in the communities that matter to your company. So go to the meetup group or host the meetup group, get into the conversations on Twitter, find out who the other people that are blogging about this is a topic. Because I think half of it is just being present and investing the time.
Hmm. Thank you so much. Our
Of
next
course.
question centers around what we should do. What about an MBA? Do you think it's important to have a business degree or an MBA as an entrepreneur? And how valuable do you think that is to the business?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's definitely value to the MBA. I don't know that it's required. I don't think that that kind of strikes me as a necessary ingredient. I think it's a helpful ingredient for some folks. I think an MBA sets you up, and a lot of what I'm really excited about is I think a lot of business school programs are reinventing themselves to support entrepreneurship even further. So, a lot of business schools are creating classes where you work on a startup idea that you could basically launch as a company. Um, and so I think that's something that, for a lot of MBA programs is very new. I think for learning management, how to motivate, recruit a team, understanding company financials is very helpful for leading some types of startups and some types of companies. Um, I don't think it's by any means required. When I think about the CEOs of a number of the software companies we know and love, a very, very small subset of them have MBAs. That said, companies that are of the business model innovation style that I mentioned, a number of those entrepreneurs do have MBAs because they studied businesses, they studied case studies, and they came up with something that was better than what existed. So I think about, Matt Salzberg from Blue Apron, right? Like, food subscription company. He's an MBA entrepreneur.
Mhm.
I think about Mario Schlosser, the founder of Oscar Health. That's a new take on, reinventing health insurance for individuals. He's an MBA founder. So there are plenty of examples, but there are as many examples as there are kind of counterexamples. So I think to the extent
Mhm.
that don't necessarily have a particular idea that you want to work on, and if you don't have deep domain experience in an area where you want to build a company, an MBA can give you a bit of a toolkit and a framework for exploring interesting kind of business models where you might explore building a company.
Got it. Thank you. That's a really great
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, and
And
above all, I think one of the things that folks should definitely appreciate. I mean, so much of the MBA is just the people you're around, and so to the earlier question about how do you find people to talk about your idea and potentially build a team. MBA ecosystems are phenomenal places to find collaborators. Co-founders
right,
of Warby Parker, they found each other in business school. Like there are a bunch of really good examples.
definitely. Thank you. So our last question centers around resources. And what do you think are the top startup resources we should all know about and be aware of?
Yeah, you know, I'm trying to think. There are a handful of buckets here. So depending on kind of where you are in the founding kind of journey, so to speak, there are certain books that can be really valuable. So I think about uh, Do More Faster as like a really good book by Brad Feld, who runs Techstars. It's basically a case study of like the lessons that a bunch of early stage companies going through Techstars learned. I think that's really good because it goes over some of like the very basics of like, okay, here's term sheet stuff, founder equity stuff, fundraising, building software. It's just like a lot of the kind of the cases of things that most startups go through. I think the blog ecosystem today of content online is so rich and so amazing. And so, I think about, uh, you know, Mattermark has a great daily roll up of like the best blog posts from VCs and founders. I would start reading that daily for sure
Mhm.
because it's a great way to learn about the relevant founders and VCs. So I think of that as a really good resource. I think spending time on Twitter is really valuable, and I know it's not for everyone because not everyone uses Twitter, but the ability to get in touch with people, learn about perspectives, get into conversations, and do all that in a really lightweight, accessible way, I think is really powerful on Twitter, and something that more folks should definitely do. I think there are a number of really great talks on YouTube, so I would look at two. I would look at two categories, but there's so much content on YouTube. There is a series called Talks at Google, which is basically a series of like amazing kind of lecturers from founders and VCs and professionals that are invited in to speak to people at Google. I think that's a really good resource. So I would definitely look. I mean, I watch these videos on a consistent basis. I just think it's just the content is so good. If you think about it, if it's like good enough for 100 engineers at Google to spend an hour listening to that person, it's probably like pretty okay. um, I really like the blitzscaling class of video content. So this is a class that Reid Hoffman taught at Stanford on scaling a startup. So I think that's really, really, really good. So I would look at that. I would look at that series of posts, and they're also like accompanying notes to go along with it too. So I think that's a good resource. Y Combinator has a video series from when they do their startup school event, and so this is a great, great kind of online resource of video content as well. It's a number of CEOs talking about their founding experience, which I think is helpful. And then there are a whole bunch of books. I should, as a follow-up, we should maybe just aggregate a list of some of these. Oh, sorry, it's Y Combinator. Combinator. Sorry. There you go.
Great. Yes, that list would be super helpful as we think about these things. So those were all the questions that we had, but now we're going to open up the floor for anyone else who has questions. So feel free to jump in. Thanks again for answering those, Peter. It's great meeting you.
Of course. My pleasure.
Thanks, Kristen. Thanks, Peter. All right, so guys, if you have a question, just look at your screen and we'll give you a minute to pull your thoughts together, but you can either raise your hand using the little hand up icon, or you can type your question into the question box. So anyone? I'll give you guys a minute to pull it together. Usually you guys are full of questions. And while you're thinking, I'll go ahead and throw out a question. So, Peter, in terms of resources what are some of your favorite resources for, oh gosh, just like kind of basic business management things like, are there any apps that you would recommend for like, mass email marketing or payroll or things of that nature that just kind of get the business
Yeah.
operations off the ground?
Yeah, this is a good point. So I'd say actually two things here. So first and foremost, we have a page of some of these resources online that I will help kind of point folks to. But on our website, kind of for Rough Draft Ventures, I'm going to pull up the page right now. We have kind of like an overview of some of these kind of best in breed tools for folks that are starting companies for the first time. I'm trying to find the link right now. Just like we did our website, which is a beautiful thing, but now I'm like lost. So that's so
But
I'll
Rough
share
Draft
that around
Ventures
as
in
well.
general is a very
Yeah, I would hope so. Yeah, I mean, our whole goal is to kind of help boost the chances of success for early stage founders. And so, a lot of the way we think about our work is, how do we kind of empower a next generation of entrepreneurs to build companies, to do so independent of how old they are or whatever their prior experience is. And so it's super important for us to kind of aggregate these best practices and resources. But I mean, a few things. So for example, for payroll, there's an amazing company called Gusto, which is also a GC portfolio company that makes it really easy for any company that's under 100 people to get payroll and benefits set up. So that's a really good resource. Another thing to think about is, getting incorporated. So from like a legal perspective, if you're going to start a company, getting set up with the right legal framework. And so LegalZoom does a really nice job of this with online tools. Coolly also has like a set of online resources for legal documents around, equity agreements and a bunch of those pieces. Um, so there's so many. I mean, for any particular business need, I can make recommendations.
Okay. All right. So the questions have come in. Let's see. So this one is from Florine, and she says, "I hear." Oh, let me see. Look at these questions. She's asking about pitches. What is your pitches are important for entrepreneurs, so what is your advice for preparing a pitch?
Yeah. I also have I've got like a template pitch deck that we could potentially share around too. This is a great question. So the pitch deck is like the fundamental, like the most important kind of business document, I think, from a fundraising perspective. It's helpful for organizing the thoughts you have around your company more broadly as well. I think it's kind of replaced the business plan document. I think it's kind of replaced the one pager. And so, I think the way to start off here is, start off with kind of 15 slides and a few points you definitely want to hammer home. You want to talk about, you want to have a kind of a problem statement, why this matters, kind of size of the opportunity, what the potential solution is, what you've built so far, who you are, and kind of, why you're the team to go after this. And then kind of a, metrics, milestones, kind of roadmap going forward. Is like a very good kind of basic framework for kind of talking through some of the components of the pitch. And depending on the space you're operating in, you'll want to play around with a few additional slides. Like, it's usually good to have a competitive landscape slide, so you kind of can help folks kind of size up where you are in the ecosystem. But I'd say that 15 slide deck is super crucial for fundraising conversations, organizing your thoughts, also for even just kind of helping you run potential advisors or employees kind of through the vision for what you have.
Thank you, Peter. All right. So let's see. Kristen, who was just talking to us, is asking, what are the biggest challenges in a startup, pitfalls, things to be aware of?
Oh, there are a number. Uh, Boy, I bucket them. So there's the people problems. So this is co-founder disputes. This is co-founders don't see eye to eye, and then they decide to kind of go separate ways. That's a challenge.
Mhm.
Companies also sometimes don't hire quickly enough. So it's like if you can't get enough people, on your team, you can't build quickly enough, and the opportunity may pass you, or competitors may pass you. One of the biggest things, honestly, like that may be less obvious, but may end up consuming most companies and dragging them into the graveyard, is having kind of these very, kind of scattered, bloated product roadmaps that kind of take the company in all different kind of directions for too long. And that then leads to the real kind of death of a company, which is usually running out of cash. Right, so I think a lot of folks think about competitors. Competitors play a role, but usually at a certain scale. Before you hit that scale, you're more likely to kind of run out of cash, either because you can't fundraise, or you don't time your fundraise enough, or you didn't anticipate, the runway, or you didn't kind of get the unit economics and the revenue model right. Those are usually the things that kind of take companies down. It's usually kind of people problems and challenges managing cash.
Great. Okay. And then Hassani is asking, oh, this is an interesting question. All right. What characteristics separate the dreamers and the doers?
Ooh, whoa, what a
It's a big question.
that's a big question. That's honestly, it's actually kind of why we call rough draft, which is they make rough drafts of their ideas. So so dreamers don't really kind of get to that step, they kind of stay in the noodling philosophical, oh, I would do this, if. Um, so the doers are the ones that are thinking about, how do I make an MVP? How can I hack this? How can I like hustle to get in touch with the person that can help me do this? I think you want to be consistently thinking about how to kind of translate your vision into, tangible products and kind of things that you can share with other people that ultimately lead to validation. That's, I think, the biggest thing is you need external validation and kind of new ways to kind of validate your ideas. And that's a big leap that I think a lot of folks get nervous about or don't think they can overcome. But the ability to kind of corral resources and people and to get other, other perspectives to kind of help validate your work, I think is the biggest thing. For doers. And there are a bunch of ways to accomplish this. I think, some of them are hyper lightweight experiments you can run, that don't require you to be technical. You know what I mean? Running really amazing surveys that give you comfort and validation that something is worth building. That's a doer. Finding someone that is your counterpart but has a separate skill set that is totally complementary. That's something a doer does. Writing a blog post that kind of puts all your thoughts and beliefs about the world into one post and, opening yourself up to critical feedback or celebration. That's something that a doer does. And honestly, I feel it in meetings, whether someone is going to pursue their idea independent of whether I provide funding or not. And that, for me, is one of the biggest indications that someone is serious. They make you feel like they're going to barrel through a wall and get it done with or without your help.
Interesting. I like that. All right, so you like this question. I know you have a soft spot for product-centered companies. So Devani is asking for ideas that rely heavy on heavy manufacturing. Do you have any tips for finding companies to partner with?
Tips for finding, say that one more time, sorry.
He says tips for finding companies to partner with. So Devani, I don't know if
Finding
you're
companies
still
to
there,
partner
if you can.
with. Yeah, no. So in general, partnerships are not easy for small companies or early companies. And so my first blush feedback is often to not rely on partnerships for as long as you can. That's like my first piece of feedback. If you think about if you're Uber or Twitter or any of these companies, like for the first year, 2 years of their lives, they did virtually no partnerships or anything. They just kind of controlled their own destiny, and you got to a scale where all of a sudden partnerships start coming your way. Granted, that doesn't work for every business model, but that's my first blush reaction. Second is, I think, to the extent that you can help educate potential partners on why your company matters, as opposed to selling them something, educating them about it, is like often a nice vector for starting conversations. I think our company Giphy, for example, is really good at educating big brands and companies on why animated GIFs matter. And they do it through education. They're like, well, let us walk you through how and why this format's being used in ways that you may or may not appreciate, right? Because, many, 60-year-old company executives are like, what's a GIF? Why would I send a GIF? What's that all about? And so there's like an education where it's like, well, people use it in this way and this messenger and blah, blah, blah. So taking this kind of didactic approach, I think, is really powerful. And what's nice about it is you can do that again, I think, if you can do kind of like independent of like domain experience if you create like really good material around it, like whether it's a blog post or like a white paper or something like that, or even just like a teaser deck. I think the third, even just kind of like how to hustle to get to the right person, like the right decision maker at a company. This is where I think you do a little bit of researching people and getting kind of, introductions to people that are like 1 degree removed from the right person, the right decision maker of that company. So I think it starts with research to find the right person. And then I think you got to kind of noodle, you got to kind of, back into the right relationship via like your LinkedIn or your Twitter graph or Facebook friends. But that usually helps kind of get the wedge in. And then I think the fourth thing, and this is like a little bit of just a mindset to have, which is you've got to think about not your company and your company's success or your idea. You have to think about what's going to get someone at that other company what matters to them, which is a promotion, a holiday bonus. Like these are the things that like humans actually optimize
Mm-hmm.
for, you know what I mean, for better or for worse. And so I think you need to think about it that way. Like you need to think about not like, oh my God, if I got this deal, it would mean so much to me. It's like if I do this right, you know, this person is going to like have the best holiday season. You know what I mean? And like if
Mm-hmm.
I can orient around that, the chances of me being successful and this partnership happening are much more likely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is good advice.
It's
So,
a
okay,
subtle,
so
it's a
Devani
subtle
has
reframing. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So Devani has a follow-up question. So he's saying, okay, so what if you have to get something made is essentially like if you need a piece of machinery or something that needs to be manufactured abroad.
Yeah, totally. What's nice is there are increasingly like almost like these kind of intermediaries that are kind of popping up to help with a lot of this kind of prototyping, to kind of like run like initial concepts of things. And so, you know, whether that's in the fashion world or the hardware world, like the ability to spin up, you know, kind of first prototypes of products like this is like, you know, whereas 15 years ago would have been impossible, now it's doable. So I look at Dragon Innovation and Bolt as like two examples of kind of hardware platforms where it's like you can, you know, with a small amount of capital, you know, you can access, you know, manufacturing kind of resources in China and other places. Number two, there's just so much information available online. This used to be a black box, and it feels like a black box today because not many people have experience doing it. But if you Google, like everyone has like, you know, spent $500 to do a random run of, you know, random prototype. So that's what I would, and then I would also say you should reach out to people that have built something that's analogous that may or may not be competitive. Ideally, not competitive, because everyone has had to go through this. You know what I mean? So I'm an investor in a company that makes activewear. So you know, it's like yoga pants and stuff you would, you know, go for a run in, and you know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, for a 27-year-old CEO to do something like that, that she would have needed, you know, tons and tons of capital. But with like a few like university relationships and asking around to the right people, you can get a first run, you know, of product for a much more kind of managed amount of capital.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, we are just now past the 45-minute mark, and we told you we would keep you at 45 minutes. So, and that was just checking the queue here. That was the last question. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. I know we're all really busy, and you especially, but we just want to thank you so much, Peter. This is great and very exciting. I know that, like I said, this is probably the most requested topic that I've had all year. So I know that people are excited to get their hustle on. It's a whole new world.
Yeah.
I can't, yeah, I keep losing applicants to our corporate partners because everybody is getting better and better at finding seed money.
This is a
And I think that's
powerful
great.
thing.
It's really
I,
exciting. So,
this is such a powerful thing for us in our community. No, so I'm excited for that. I think now has never been a better time to basically kind of take one's destiny into their own hands and kind of and get a company off the ground. So definitely everyone should take advantage of it.
absolutely. So, do you have any final thoughts for us?
No, I mean honestly, take your destiny in your own hands and build something. No, I would say feel free to get in touch with me. You know, we're going to try to aggregate more and more of these resources on the Rough Draft website for folks. But no, I'm super excited to be a resource for anyone that's thinking about starting a company. Happy to review pitch decks anytime, and super excited to do more with everyone. So thanks for this.
All right. All right. Well, thank you so much. This was great information. I'm going to let you go, and thank you, Kristen, for leading the first portion. And if you guys have any follow-ups for Peter, you can just get in touch with me. I'll just type I'm hduke at ronbrown.org, and I'll be happy to field anything for Peter going forward. But thanks again, Peter, and thanks everyone.
Thank
Happy
you.
holidays. Take care. I'm
Thanks so
gonna
much.
I'm gonna hang up now. Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, team.
Okay,
Ciao.
bye.